Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the True Life Podcast. I hope everybody is having a beautiful day. I hope the sun is shining. I hope the birds are singing and the wind is at your back. I have with me today, ladies and gentlemen, with me today is the one and only Jennifer Swanson. And I would like you to help me welcome her to another thought-provoking and inspiring episode of the True Life Podcast. Today, we're honored to be joined by a guest whose lifelong passion for science and technology has ignited the imaginations of countless young minds. From starting her first science club in her garage at the age of 7 to becoming an award-winning author of over 50 nonfiction books, Jennifer Swanson has truly dedicated her life to making the wonders of STEM accessible to children everywhere. Jennifer's books like Brain Games, Super Gear, and Save the Crash-Test Dummies not only educate but inspire a deep curiosity about the world around us. With accolades that range from the Parents' Choice Gold Award to National Science Teaching Association's Best STEM Awards, she's a powerhouse in the realm of science education. What sets Jennifer apart is her ability to connect complex scientific ideas to everyday life in ways that leave us in awe of the universe. Whether she's presenting at the Library of Congress, National Book Festival, or the World Science Festival, Jennifer reminds us that the world is a place of wonder waiting to be explored. Today, we dive into the mind of a true science communicator, and we'll explore how her work helps kids and the kid inside all of us unlock the potential of discovery. So buckle up and get ready to podcast. Jennifer, thanks for being here. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks so much, George. That was an amazing bio. So can I hire you for my publicist there? That was awesome. Thank you so much.
Well, I'm truly excited. I have a young daughter and I work at an after school program for kids. And I am just so thankful that we are showing kids a way in which to see the world, a new lens to see the world that's curious and exciting and invites exploration. And so I figured we just kind of jump right in here, Jennifer. I've got a few questions that I've put up and a few that my guests have kind of chimed in. And I thought we would just jump into the deep end with both feet. So let me start off with this. Your ability to distill complex scientific concepts for young minds is unparalleled. How do you view the relationship between curiosity and understanding?
Oh my gosh, you can't have one without the other. Right? Like everything
Right.
starts with being curious.
Yep.
I was that kid who asked tons of questions. Lots of questions. I was always asking my mom, how does this work? How does this work? And I'm old enough that we had a set of encyclopedias. Yes.
Yep.
And I was directed to that quite often. And I read them. I don't know how many, if this is a true geek thing, but I would read the encyclopedias, right? And get all the fun facts from there. So for me, curiosity is everything. I have never had a question from a kid that was a dumb question.
Right.
Anything that they don't understand, or even better, that they're trying to understand, is great. It gives you kind of a view into their worldview, how they look at things, what their brains are thinking, which is way more than sometimes what they're saying, right? So for me, curiosity leads to understanding, but also opens way more avenues. If you start being curious, then it's not about one thing. It's all of a sudden 3 things and 5 things and 10 things. So that's where my brain goes. And I watch kids do this, and that's what's so exciting to me.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It's interesting to see that sort of silent pause that happens in the mind of a child when they're thinking. It's like, whoa, you can see the wheels turning and the bridges being built and the connections being made. And do you think that after the amount of work you've done, like speaking and writing these different books, do you think curiosity is something that's innate to the human condition?
Yes.
Why do you think
Absolutely,
that?
absolutely. Now, unfortunately, sometimes what we experience in our lives kind of quashes that slightly.
Yep.
And I think as adults, maybe we lose a lot of that curiosity we had as kids, because it's not, we're doing jobs and we're doing things, and we have to take kids to soccer and all this kind of stuff. But yes, I mean, I have had conversations with people who walk into my presentations and are like, you know what? I don't like science. I mean, okay, I have to be here. It might be a teacher, a librarian. It might be a parent who has to attend, whatever. It's an adult who's like, ugh, okay. And by the end, they come out and they're like, oh my gosh, like I never thought about it that way. And then they'll stay. They're the ones that stay afterwards and ask me all of the questions after the talk. So yes, all of their curiosity just comes out of them.
It's interesting to think that on some level, whether it's our society or maybe life's pressures or, maybe just circumstances, that on some level they sort of take the magic out of science. And maybe it's the way it's presented to us with these hard facts, this sort of, calculated understanding of what it is. We can't measure this thing, so we're not going to put it in there. Like, what do you think that there's anything that we can do to present science in a way that still creates that robust curiosity and that flavor and that passion around it to keep us going through science as we go through those gaps?
I mean, absolutely. And honestly, the science community is taking steps towards that. Or there's lots of science communicators now, and that's like their job. So they may not be scientists themselves, or they were former scientists or engineers or whatever, but now they're working to translate what scientists and engineers do into language that people understand. And so I start with the basics when I talk to kids at schools. I mean, even like kindergartners and pre-Kers. And I say, science is all around you. And I ask them, and I say, all right, we're going to look around. What do you see that's science? And they think. And, usually the first ones I get are the computer, right? The obvious stuff. And I said, okay, yes, but what else? Then one kid will go, the chair? Yes. My clothes? Yes. And all of a sudden they start seeing science everywhere. It was so funny. I was at a school one time and I talked to, oh my God, the whole school, like, I don't know, 1,400 kids, at different times. So I was there in the afternoon, but I had talked to the first graders in the beginning. And so I saw them when they were coming back from their recess after lunch, and they're, all walking by and they're all like, oh, there's the author. And this one kid stops and goes, Miss Swanson, I discovered science. He was in first grade outside. He goes, we all smell now because it was really hot. And sweat is science, right? And I was like, it definitely is, right? So that kid, I mean, gross, because sometimes science is best when it's gross, right? Yeah. But that kid was aware of the science all around them. And I think when we are aware of that, then we're less scared of it, right?
Yeah, I agree. Can I share a quick story, a little science story with a little girl that is in my class? It was one of the coolest things ever. I was working with TK in kindergarten, and we have this little girl that was running around. And I want everyone to, if you're just listening to my voice, picture this. Beautiful young little lady, probably 4.5, 5 maybe. She's got long hair, and she's in the classroom, and she has I have a bunch of kids, but I noticed her in the back by the sink, and she has this bucket that used to hold pens and pencils, and she's filling it up with water. And I look across the sink, and there's two empty bottles of baking soda. There's some wet paper towels and some soap. And I walk over there, and the first thing I do is this is a pretty big mess over here. But I'm still, I'm like, this is a huge mess. But at the same time, I'm curious, I wonder what she's building here. It's probably a secret potion or something, And so I engage her, and I'm like, what kind of concoction is this? And she's like, wait, I can't talk to you yet. And she's mixing and doing this stuff. And she reaches over and grabs a Q-tip, and she takes that Q-tip and she dips it in there and stirs it around, and she holds it up to me like it's fire. And she goes, here, put this in your ear. I'm like, I'm not going to put that in my ear.
Okay.
But it's so amazing to see the willingness for kids to begin experimenting with things around them. And if they can at that early age and start seeing results of what is possible, I think the future becomes incredibly bright. Thanks for letting me share that.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, I love that story. I mean, I love seeing kids do science in action, right? Science is powerful when it's in action, and so is engineering. All of these different things, you can touch it, feel it, build it yourself. Realize that not everything you do works the first time, right?
Yes.
But that's okay. And kids these days have so much about, they take tests and tests and tests, and they all have to do the best at the test. Well, guess what? Sometimes scientists spend years, months, whatever, creating a project our engineers do, and it doesn't work, or it doesn't work the way they want them to. But they learn from it. And that's like your student. She's like, hey, I created this thing, try it out. And maybe she wanted you to try it out. And if you would have said, oh, it didn't work, she'd be like, that child probably would have gone back and redid her thing, right? Redid the experiment.
Yeah, absolutely. And it brings up another interesting point when the idea of science and language. Sometimes the language we use can be limiting, and I almost wonder if there's a parallel, because in science it seems we tend to throw out the things we can't measure, but those things could have incredible effects on the experiment. Like, how do you balance that?
So this is the thing when I'm writing for kids, I actually try to use kid language. Okay. So if I'm going to say something is, 100 feet long, I'm going to say it's the size of a football field. Something is the size of an orange. Something is, when I'm talking about atoms, then sometimes I use an apple. So there's an apple with the outer skin, right? And then inside the core is the nucleus, and that's where the protons and the neutrons live and all. So if you can immediately put an image in people's faces, and I say kids, but I actually mean kids of all ages, because this works for adults too. If you can have them see it, which is why a lot of my books have big images and infographics, then people will instantly understand, or at least have a better understanding of it. And that's how science should be approached in my terms. I mean, we do get all these big terms, and they're important because I use the correct terms in my book, but you have to explain those terms, right, in the way that someone's going to understand them.
It seems to me one of the many reasons you're so successful is that your use of imagery, language, and presentation are sort of creating a new kind of self-awareness. And I see that in kids today. I feel like kids today are smarter on some level. Maybe it's social media. Like, maybe can you dive into that a little bit, like a new kind of self-awareness? And you've already explained it a little bit with imagery and language and metaphors, but maybe you could just unpack it a little bit more.
Well, I think kids are, like you said, they know a lot more than we did maybe when we were kids.
Yep.
They're exposed to way more information, and they take a lot of it in. And I'm not sure that everyone understands exactly how much they take in, because school is so regimented, right? The teachers have to do like this at this time and this at that time. There's not a lot of science. There's not a lot of room for discussion and critical thinking about science and STEM. And so when I go to do my programs, it's kind of interesting. A lot of the time I go, there's the really quiet child that never raises their hand, doesn't participate, but is doing a lot of thinking. That child is usually the one that raises their hand 15 times while I'm talking. I can't even count how many times I've had teachers come up afterwards and be like, that kid never talks. But clearly, and we're having discussions, and it's not just boys, it's girls, it's whatever. But they are engaged. And I think part of that is because they're invited to be engaged, and they're told, yes, we want to hear what you have to say. And I was talking about particle physics one day, kind of like just talking a little bit about how you smash two atoms together. I had the opportunity to visit CERN, the Large Hadron Collider, where they're trying to figure out how the universe began, which is really amazing. Super geeky stuff, which was like right up my alley. And I had a picture of it, and I told the kids, this is me standing in front of the Alice detector. And they asked about it. And these were like second graders, right? And so I tried to use little things. And I basically said, two protons go together and then they fly apart and all of these things. And we talked about the Big Bang. And one kid just raised his hand over here. And he's like, he asked me this really intuitive question, which I can't remember exactly how I phrased it, but it was something along the lines of, if there was nothing, how would the proton and the neutron stay together in the nucleus? Are there forces at that level? This is a second grader.
Oh,
wow. Yes. This is in front of like 150 kids, and the teachers are like, And I'm like, this is a thinking kid. And I was basically like, have you seen Big Bang Theory? You should be like the next Sheldon, right? Like he was and so I gave him the answer that I could in front of the kids that I could, but I was basically like, come after me, I'll give you a little bit more, right? This is from a second grader. It was incredible. The thinking that goes on. And this had to be, I mean, clearly he had to be exposed to this somehow because he didn't just learn this from me. But that's what I mean. I think kids just need to be invited into the conversation more, right?
Yeah. It's a fascinating story. I'm super excited to hear it and learn more. You have taught at some pretty prestigious places and definitely given lectures around the world. In a world that was more geared toward education, could you see science sort of being the foundation of a curriculum instead of maybe some social studies or other sorts of, semantic kind of ideas? Like, what do you think about science and engineering being the core instead of it being STEM Tuesdays? Maybe it's like STEM every day.
So in my world, right, if I get to control everything,
yes.
Let's assume that. Yes, because science relates to everything.
Yeah.
Because critical thinking and some of these skills that you have to use in science, like you have to try experiments, you have to look at them, you have to kind of gauge how they work, decide, back up, make changes. All of these are life lessons. They're all life lessons that we all have to do. Granted, they don't all apply to science. Sometimes they apply to, hey, why is my dog not eating? Something like that. So then you try different food with your dog, right? And then you try this and you try different things. But yeah, if it were in science, I mean, I've written books that have history in them. Science and history go hand in hand. Science and politics go hand in hand. Because, quite honestly, that's where you get the funding and it's all about the money. Writing, scientists have to write huge proposals, and they have to write them in an understandable language because the people reading the proposals don't always understand the science. Same thing for us science authors. So in my world, absolutely, I would have a science academy that covered all of the subjects based on science. Now, I just need money to do that, right?
Yeah. I'm excited because I see that becoming more and more of a staple in the kids' classrooms. People I feel like we're moving towards that on some level. But with that move comes this sort of, like interesting double helix of science and spirituality. Those are very interesting. That's a very interesting relationship. And it's really fun to think about and talk about. Maybe I could get, what is your understanding or your take or your thoughts on the relationship between science and spirituality?
I mean, wow, that is a big topic. One, I will preface with, this is Jen Swanson's opinion, right? To me, I think you can have both. I don't see why not. I mean, if you believe in God or there's a being out there, why on earth would he or she not create things to make us curious and wonder about it? Why not? Right? And as far as the whole concept of time, and I mean, I've written books that have evolution in it and all this, and I realize that those are very particular topics that everybody has their own opinions about, and I'm, whatever, they're all fine. But the concept of time is something we humans have invented. So I'll just leave it at that. So, and it works for us and it works very well, but in a bigger scale, especially when you're looking at, like, I've done a lot of books on space and looking out into the universe, and time out there is like so different from time on the earth, right? Like we're talking billions and billions of years and billions of distances to get miles to get away from all of these places. So, I mean, I have no problem consolidating the both. I know some people do, but I don't see why you can't have both. Like why you have to be absolute. But again, that's my opinion.
I love it. I think it's fascinating. Sometimes in my class we'll talk about time and we bring up these weird sort of things like, why is October the 10th month, but an octagon has 8 sides? Why is December the 12th month, but Deca, there's all these little hints that are left around for us to investigate about this thing called time,
Yep. Oh yeah, you
So
can
much
write a
fun.
really cool book and have like you could have like a whole podcast series on time, right? Like
Totally.
there's a lot to investigate there.
Yeah, so this is an interesting idea. So, given that you have written over 50 nonfiction books, your body of work is vast. Do you ever feel that your role as a science educator is also to guide young minds in understanding the ethical and philosophical implications of scientific advancement?
Yes. And I
Cool.
think I know that was a real fast one. So just to give you a little bit of my background. So I actually was I went to the Naval Academy. I graduated from the Naval Academy in 1990. So I have like a whole military background kind of
Nice.
too. Like I like to have things that are, in order and so to speak. But yes, I think that is absolutely one thing that all scientists, engineers, whatever, should ask themselves, not only can we do this, but should we? And I think as a whole, as a community, they do a pretty good job of it for the most part. There are certain areas, and we're not going to discuss politics, but, there are certain areas where things can be taken a different way. But I actually just wrote a piece about this a little while ago. And for me, it's all about perspective. Now, say, for example, a different country created this amazing invention. Okay. And to them, like no one had ever done it before. So from the scientific community, this is really, really cool and amazing. But say this other country is like, well, what if they are going to use that as a weapon or something against us? It's going to maybe make their crops better than ours or, something like that. So if you're this country, maybe it's not as great as you think. You see it's all about perspective and where you are and maybe how this particular invention is going to be used or something like that. So that's something I think most scientists and engineers are aware of and hopefully are aware of. And maybe we as a society also are more aware of stuff like that too.
Yeah, it's interesting. I know that there's some schools of thought that believe well, we can just look at sort of the large language models right now. We can kind of see that whole paradigm playing out. On some level, people are like, hey, we got to slow this thing down. And other people are like, this is going to free us.
Yes.
This is us. Can't you see the mirror here?
Yes.
It's so exciting the times we live in if you're willing just to maybe slow down and pay attention to it. What are your thoughts on the idea of these large language models and maybe the way they're changing perspective?
So, I mean, if you're talking about AI and
Yeah.
books, right? Okay. So this is a subject that's very near and dear to me and all of the other authors. So on the one hand, as a STEM author, as a science geek and whatever, I think AI is stinking cool. It's just amazing. And, I adore robots. I don't know why. I think robots are the coolest thing ever. I mean, I can't even put my finger on it, but last year I got to go to NASA Johnson Space Center and I was a part of they have like a NASA social program where I got to meet the Artemis 2 astronauts, which was amazing. But I also got to meet the robot that they have created to go to the moon. It's the prototype called Valkyrie. And I can't even tell you which one was more exciting, meeting the astronauts or the robot. I mean, they like let us take pictures. There's a picture of me standing next to this robot, just grinning like this crazy person, like, right? So AI is incredible. On the other hand, I am absolutely not crazy about AI writing books. I'm not. And because part of the reason how AI is learning to write books is they're taking books that are already published and reading our books and they're having it learn. And I understand it has to learn, but what I am afraid of and what I know I've talked to a lot of teachers is kids are just having AI write their papers for them. And that is not how this should be used, in my opinion, or in teachers, because kids don't learn. If once you learn how to write, I mean, have at it, right? But I think that's one thing that we are at the moment, society is kind of struggling with. Where do you bound some of this? And I am not the one to answer that question. But yeah, these are bigger things that maybe as society we need to figure out how to bound some of this new technology as it comes out, which is not easy to do. It's easier to say than it is to do.
We might have to reach back to Isaac Asimov to figure this out.
There you go. Love that reference.
Oh, it's classic. It's there is even Marshall McLuhan, and you can see this sort of thing play out where when a new technology comes out, sometimes it makes our skills atrophy in some ways, right? Like
Yep.
if I think there was a really big argument for writing, how it gave people the illusion of knowing without the experience, and if that was the printing press, then so too can this be AI, right?
Okay. Yes. Well, and yeah, I would agree, because sometimes these inventions or these things just hit the market, and then you also don't even realize how far out the ripples go.
Yep.
Right. And then you have to kind of sometimes pull back and do different things. But I mean, as far as AI robots, I think it's cool, but I absolutely think we need to figure out a way to put bounds on them. I don't want my AI robot who's cleaning my house be like, hey, it's your turn to to clean the bathroom, right? be reminded of that or whatever, right? Like you want to have, on the other hand, I think I'm desperately trying to get my husband to get us to buy one of those little robots that mows your lawn. I just want to watch it mow the lawn. I know I'm like a super geek, right?
It's super awesome. It's it's fascinating to think, and technology doesn't care if it makes our life better or it makes our life worse. Like that is the intention of the person that's sort of engineering on the background, or maybe not even the engineer, but I don't know, maybe the societal pressure on some level.
Right. Yeah.
It's fascinating to think about.
It's a lot of fun. No, actually, so the funny thing is one of my neighbors across the street has the mower.
Okay.
And I went out like early Sunday morning to like let my dog out. And I was like, oh my gosh. So I took the dog back inside, stood out there for, I kid you not, 10 or 15 minutes videoing this thing mowing the lawn. My husband's like, what are you doing? I'm like, there's a lawnmower robot. He's like, oh, okay. He knows me very well.
Yeah, I think that it's occurrences like that or drone footage that are allowing our children and your readers, the readers of your books, to have that different perspective. Like when we grew up, we didn't have aerial drone footage of the Grand Canyon. We didn't have a GoPro on a lawnmower seeing like all the bugs getting out of the way and stuff like that. Like it's pretty tremendous to think about all the avenues and how much it opens to explore when you start seeing things on such a level, right?
Yes. Oh, absolutely. And you get to see nature in ways you could never see before. I mean, there's some amazing documentaries that we have watched. One of our favorite is Bertie Gregory. He is on, I'm trying to remember, the Disney Channel. He has a show, but you can see like the elephants move around the savannah, but he's getting drone footage. So you're also not really kind of entering their world and disturbing their world, but you can see where they move and all this kind of stuff. And yes, it's great to see, but it also provides lots of information to the ecologists that live in the area. So they know where the elephants are and where they're moving and all this kind of stuff. So hopefully they can keep poachers out, but also maybe expand the areas that are protected so that these elephants can roam. So there's so many good things that drones can do. There are also not so good things that drones can do.
Yeah. It's that double-edged sword, I guess, of technology. It's interesting that you bring up ecology and the idea of relationships, be them in the environment or with ourselves as a family. Do you think that we are learning more about the human experience by investigating our relationship to technology?
Yes. I mean, I think there's lots of tools these days that we can learn from. So in my podcast, Solve It for Kids, We've actually had a lot of naturalists. We've had people that do bird rehabilitations, and are ecologists. And there's so many tools. Like if you want to identify a bird now, there's an app where you just take a picture of the bird and the phone tells you what it is. The app tells you what the bird is. And then you can learn about it. So you could learn so you could just sit in your backyard and see what birds come in and be like, oh, well, there's a cardinal family. Oh, there's a blue jay. And you can learn about these birds. The same thing for plants. We actually had, one of the scientists they were doing a study to determine the heights of trees. So we asked everybody around the world to get on this app, which I don't remember the name of it now, but you could measure your tree and then you send in where you are, right? And it goes into their big database. So there's so many opportunities to be a citizen scientist, which is what they call it these days. And so you can do all this stuff through your phone, which we never had when I was a kid, right? Yeah. I mean, we wrote letters back then, but yes, there's technology that you can actually participate and be a scientist, even if you're 5, right? I mean, you might have to have your parents help you with the app and whatever, but why not? This is so cool.
Yeah. And I think that particular example speaks to the bright future of our children, in that for a long time, education has been a learning process of hearing the examples of other people. But a lot of times that pales in comparison to the experience of it. And if you're 5 years old and you are watching the dynamics of flight from a bluebird on your computer and watching the wings and then watching it right there, you're getting some real-time in-field experience. We should be excited about the future.
Yeah. Well, and think about what that kid is thinking about too. Yeah. And the curiosity and the questions and kind of the connections that this child is making. I mean, who knows? Maybe he or she will one day grow up to rehabilitate, birds themselves and save them, or, whatever. I mean, you have no idea where this is going to lead. And it might just have started with the questions from being 5.
Yeah. Yeah. So many of the great authors or people that I admire or read biographies about, they often start with a childhood story. And sometimes it's like, well, when I was 9, I had to change school, or when I was 5, it kind of seems interesting to me that a lot of purposeful discoveries come from tragedy on some level. Do you think that there's a connection there?
I mean, I think so. And I think it's because, unfortunately, you go through something that, whatever your tragedy is, it changes you. It makes you view life in a different way. Sometimes from that point on, sometimes just slightly, it makes you more thankful for what you have. Maybe it makes you more empathetic towards someone else who's been through that. I mean, sure, I think that tragedy, or even significant events, not even tragedies, but maybe really big things too in your life can change. I mean, sometimes it'll just make you completely take a right direction, right? Like a right turn or a left turn or something like that. And it can change what you do and who you become.
Yeah. It sort of makes me think about the multiverse approach. Like every decision leads you down a different road of a different life. And it's so science fiction like.
Yeah, very philosophical, but also, I mean, we could throw time travel in there and have a really fun discussion, right? Like,
yeah. Is that a topic that you have gotten in one of your mini books?
Not yet, because I write mostly nonfiction, but then, you never know. I mean, maybe someday. I mean, people ask me all the time, they're like, where do you get all your ideas? And I'm like, okay, I am a curious person.
Right.
And thank goodness my husband is as well, because every time we travel, even when our kids were small, wherever we would go, we would always do something sciencey. We were always going to museums. If there was a science museum, we went to the science museum. We went to history museum, all that kind of stuff. And to this day, we still do that when we travel, because I want to know. And so I have notebooks filled, or text myself questions. Ooh, I learned this. Ooh, I do need to do a book about this. I have so many book ideas. Like I need to live like 3 lifetimes to write all these books.
I'm glad that you do. And you bring up an interesting idea about traveling. It seems to me that traveling is a phenomenal form of education. It gives you it's almost like speaking another language. Like you get to
Yes.
see the world through another lens and experience it in a different way. As someone who travels around that much, maybe you could give us some insights. I'm seeing terms like digital nomad come up, and there's lots of different charter schools and private schools. Do you see this idea of traveling, be it through the internet or actual moving places, as the idea of a global citizen? Do you see this part of childhood curriculum continue to expand in all your travels that you're doing? Is this like a new part of education, hopefully?
I would absolutely love for that to happen. And the thing is I think a lot of teachers would as well. The problem is the curriculums these days
Right.
are very rigid. But I think this expands kids, and again, kids of all ages, knowledge of what's around them and what's out there. And so you're looking at different things. And so something that we might think of here in the United States as being, like we're used to deserts and all of this kind of stuff. And say we go to like Iceland or Greenland where they don't really have deserts, or they have lots of ice, which some places can be a cold desert, like Antarctica. There's all of these different things. So even you're learning different climates, you're tasting different foods, you're exposing yourself to the clothes that you wear. It's funny. We've been to London multiple times with our kids. We were lucky enough to be able to afford to take our kids to Europe a couple of times when they were teenagers. And my daughters were very well aware. They were like teenagers. They were very well aware of how you dress, right? And they were like, "Mom, you shouldn't wear tennis shoes when you walk around in London." And I was like, "Why not? They're very comfortable." She goes, "That makes you look like an American. And we are trying to fit in." And I was like, I mean, this is something your 14-year-old child says to you. But on the other hand, I was like, oh, well, so that means she's observing, right? What's going on, what other people are wearing. She wants to fit in. She's looking to see what she has to fit in, all of these kinds of things. So that meant that she's concerned about all of these different things and aware of them. And so I thought that was cool. Now, I still wore the tennis shoes because they were so comfortable. We were going to walk for like 8 hours.
Agreed. Yeah, I want to take you back for a moment into Jennifer Swanson's perfect world of education.
Oh,
I know
okay.
I have, I want to hear more about this because I know that some of my, potentially there could be teachers from all around listening, and maybe some people from Boys and Girls Club or some after school programs, some charter programs. Can you walk us through something maybe you have done, or maybe something that you were thinking could be done in a curriculum that could really help people understand or participate in the world of STEM? Is there something on the edge that you've been thinking about that could be put into a curriculum in the perfect world of Jennifer Swanson education?
Absolutely. Yes, as a matter of fact. So I have this podcast with my co-host, Jeff Gagne, called Solve It for Kids. And in this podcast, we interview lots of scientists, engineers, and experts. And we talk to them about their jobs. So the idea is that I've had in all of these, 14 years, I guess I've been going to all these schools. I have so many teachers and parents come up to me and be like, my kid's a science kid. Yeah, I don't know anything about science. Like, how do I help this kid learn about careers? Because from the time they're 5, everyone says, what do you want to be when you grow up? Yeah. Right? And how many of them say, I want to be a material science engineer and build and create toilet paper? Right? Not many. Okay. Or maybe a chemical engineer or whatever. So we've had this podcast going for a while, and it's more of an interview kind of like this. But what I would love to do, there's 2 things. One, I would love to figure out how to get this to be used in the classroom, which I know probably requires me making something very short and small because I know there's not enough time. But the other thing that I would love to do, and that I'm working on, we'll see, when I clone myself and have more time, is I'm working on creating YouTube shorts that when I taught for 14 years for Johns Hopkins University Center for Talented Youth. I was a middle school science teacher for 14 years. And the one thing I did, which they thought I was kind of a little out there, was I had this thing called the question of the week. And kids could kind of like, this was before video was big. We started like way back a while ago. And kids would ask questions. And some of them started out with, why is the sky blue? And then I'd have all of the kids answer, why do you think? And I was like, you can't look it up. You have to just tell me what you think. And so we would have these kind of online discussions. And then at the end, I would give them the answer. And they started from why is the sky blue to like a particle physics question. Like seriously, like these kids are really, really smart. But the crazy thing was I had parents whose kids would end my classes because they'd be like 3 months. And they would beg me to stay on the email list for these questions because we are talking. This is what we do every Friday night at dinner. We discuss your question of the week. And I've done a lot of things in my life to help kids. That one like really hits me. I have all of these parents and these families discussing science at the dinner table and arguing over, well, why do you think the sky's blue? And well, all this kind of stuff. To me, I would love to figure out how to turn that into like a short little YouTube kind of thing for free that teachers can use in their classroom. That's my goal. Now, am I going to have the time to do this and all this kind of stuff? I'm working on it. So I'll check back with you and let you know how it goes. But that's what I would love to do because for me, there's not a time for a whole big curriculum, right? I'm not the curriculum person. What I want to do, my goal, is give them the spark of curiosity, right? Encourage them to be curious and then ask questions and you get the dialogue going. Like I said, those kids before, the kids that talk, it's because they were told, it's okay. Ask your question. That's what I would love to do. And in Jennifer Swanson school.
I love it. I'm glad. Thank you for sharing that. I think it's a cool thing that it harkens back to that ripple effect. You throw that stone into the pond, and the next thing you know, you have families at dinner time, cousins coming over, and aunties and uncles, and wait a minute, that's not what it is. It's so beautiful.
Right, but we're not arguing about, other things. We're arguing about science, right?
Right.
And curiosity.
Yeah, and there's no wrong answer. On some level, we're all putting stuff out there. Here's my idea. Here's what about this? What about that?
It's different perspectives, yes. And that's actually how science works best. Science works best when it's a team of scientists or engineers all working on a problem and they come from all different backgrounds and they're all providing different perspectives. That's when it works best.
Yeah, the diversity of opinion, right? Like I never thought about it from that angle, or here's this perspective, or it's so fascinating to go. Do you ever? Sometimes when I look at the big institutions like Ivy League schools or some really elite schools, you see them sort of have their own business model with education. Like students are sometimes working to write papers for pharmaceutical companies, or that they're working almost in tandem to create a spin-off business that stays in-house. Could you in your perfect world ever imagine maybe like a primary school or a middle school child graduating with a residual income, like putting something up on Gumroad or one of these places? Like that's possible, right? Wouldn't that be beautiful?
Why not? That would be amazing. I think that would be, also speaking as a parent who put 3 kids through big schools, that would be great, right? To not have school loans, but that's a whole nother discussion.
Yes.
But why not? What kids have the opportunity to do these days, and some of them quite honestly are. I have read articles about teenagers or whatever who have invented new things and worked with big organizations. Yes. And as long as they, why not?
Yeah.
Why not? As long as they have oversight, of course, and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And getting real, again, having put 3 kids through college and they're now on their own, getting real life experience working with businesses or whatever while you're in school, that's invaluable. That would be fantastic.
Yeah, I'm looking at you, Spring Hill School. Well, I live here in the Bay Area. All right, so there's tons of ideas and investors and intelligent, incredible, wonderful people that want to
Yeah.
make a better future. And I don't see why that can't happen, to have a school invest in or have speakers come in and teach the kids. And there could be a residual for everybody on some level. And I think if we can move towards that sort of little bit of a model, I think we could really push out some of the abstract ideas of negativity that are crunching in on us sometimes. So anyways,
Yes.
thanks for letting me get that out there. I wanted to
Absolutely.
say
That
that.
would be fun.
So we kind of covered this a little bit, but maybe we can dive just back a little bit. And that's, do you see a potential for technology to either alienate children from nature or conversely bring them closer to a deeper appreciation of the natural world?
I mean, yes and no. Again, it's perspective. That's what we talked about, right?
Yep.
So if the child is using their screen as kind of an interference from being outside or whatever, because they're on their screen, and some of these games and all these kinds of things that they interact with are very real, and they seem like, they look like they could have leaves move and all this stuff. The amount of detail that these games and some of these things have these days, it's incredible.
Yep.
But sometimes you should go outside, take your shoes off, walk through the grass, right? And just like I said before, there's a lot of apps that you can take your phone, you can video. I mean, there's kids who have podcasts and they're like 8.
Yep.
I mean, I met one. I was at one of my, I did an astronaut aquanaut presentation at Fernbank Science Center in outside Atlanta. And afterwards, this kid comes up and he's like 8, the second grader, and he starts asking me all these really intelligent questions. And I'm going, okay. And his mom goes, he has a podcast. His name, and I can't even remember. She gives me his card. Here's his name, and here's this, and I was like, oh my gosh. And I looked him up and he's got YouTube videos and all this kind of stuff. And it's about science questions and being outside and all these different things. I was like, wow, I could probably learn a lot from this kid. And he's like 8. It was incredible. So yes, it's all about perspective and how it's used. So you can use it to help you. You can use it to create a barrier. It's up to you.
Yeah, it's really well said. I'm so thankful to hear that. I really do believe that the kids have so much opportunity at their features if they're lucky enough to have an environment that allows for that. It makes me think too, when you bring up an individual, a young child that is beginning to create online. In some ways, I see that as being the resume of the future. Like, what have you created? Can you show me an audience? Can you show me something that you have been able to translate from vision into reality? It kind of seems like that is going to be the resume of the future. What do you think about that?
I mean, on the one hand, I think it's great. On the other hand, I'm a little sad.
Why?
Well, because I don't want people. It's hard for. I'm trying to figure out how to say this right. So I learned so much keeping my own journals, writing, doing handwriting, drawing my own things. There's so much your brain learns from the brain handwriting kind of connection. And to lose that would, I think, not be great for the person and society as a whole, right? There's a lot of amazing connections that happen in your brain and learning that happens by writing. On the other hand, I understand the creating and online, and I know that is another way to express your creativity. So my hope is that we keep it all.
Yeah. Right?
Because there are some people that are amazing at being communicators online, but even me, like I like presenting in person. And when the whole pandemic happened and basically our publishers were like, okay, you need to now start making videos. And we were all like, wait, what? I like the interaction. I love to present to 3 kids, 300 kids, whatever. I've presented 1,500 kids. I like to see their response. I like to interact with them. And so I like to be out and about as I'm creating. That's me creating kind of thing too. that's what helps me to go back and sit in my little room and write. Now, having said that, no, I don't write my books longhand. I compose them. I have friends who write their entire novels longhand, which,
Oh my gosh.
more power to them. I do like my keyboard. But I think if we keep all of those things, that kind of makes us more of a well-rounded society.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. There's something magical that happens. It's almost like your body is giving your brain permission to translate it into reality when you're doing that, right? Like there's something, and you hope retain it better. And I've read a few things about it, but it's fascinating. It's a whole aspect of change. And maybe that's why the world is changing, is maybe less people are doing that and they're creating online. Like that would create a whole new world of perspective. You would see things different.
Well, and I know that a lot of kids are not being taught to do cursive anymore.
Yes. Yeah.
Which honestly is heartbreaking to me. I understand, I understand again the rigors of the curriculum, but it's heartbreaking to me. And it's kind of interesting because when I have book signings and I sign my books, I sign them in cursive, and I've had so many kids go, "What does this say?" And that just makes me go, "Oh," but I mean, they're doing different things, but I hope we never lose the ability to actually write with a pencil and paper, and draw like that. I hope that doesn't go away.
It brings up I agree 100%. I think there's something so beautiful. It happened with calligraphy, right? Like people used to be able to write wonderful calligraphy and these works of art. And now it's just it's just this symbolic thing that it's pretty, but we're not sure what it is.
Yes.
On some level, it makes me wonder, like everybody knows what it's like to hear the sound of getting a voicemail. Most people know what it sounds like to hear your microwave go off. On some level, are we beginning to learn a language of tones that's taught to us by technology?
Oh, wow. Now that's something I haven't thought. No, probably yes. Right?
Yeah.
I'm of the age. Do you remember when the whole AOL thing, where you had the modem?
Yeah. You got mail.
Yeah, right. And even the movie You've Got Mail.
Yes.
Right. I remember when that all started. And now it's kind of funny because I think a lot of, maybe not most, but a lot of kids don't even have like a home phone in their house. Like we still have a home phone, and because I'm not giving up my home phone. Like I'm one of those people because I live in Florida and we have hurricanes, and I'm like, when this doesn't work, cell phone doesn't work because the towers are down, I have my phone and I'll be able to call people. Right. But when it rings, sometimes my kids, they just like ignore it. And I'm like, did you not hear the phone ringing? And they're like, my cell phone didn't ring. I'm like, right? Like, be aware. But yes, I do think we are getting trained to different sounds. I never thought about that, but yeah.
Yeah, it's like a tonal language. Like, some of the different languages around the world have different tones. And I don't know, it's just so curious to me to explore that sort of, I see it's kind of similar.
Oh, maybe that's a new book, man. It's all about the sounds you hear. Ooh. See? I'll have to break that one down when I get off the podcast.
Jennifer, we have talked for about an hour, but it feels like we have talked for about 3 minutes. And
it's been fun.
This is so much fun. I'm really thankful. I hope you can come back and maybe we can do a panel or something like that, or we can talk more often because I really enjoyed this. But before I let you go today, would you be so kind as to tell people what you have coming up, where they can find you, and what you're excited about?
Sure, that would be great. So you can find me at jenniferswansonbooks.com. You can also find me at solveitforkids.com. I wear like multiple hats. Let's see. Some of the cool things coming up, I have a book coming out in November this year. This is my first nonfiction picture book biography, probably only one. But this is called Up Periscope. It is how engineer Ray Montague revolutionized shipbuilding. And this book is about the fabulous Ray Montague, who was actually the hidden figure of the Navy. And you can probably figure why I wrote this. She was the first person to come up with a computer program to build and design ships, which used to take them like 2 years or more by hand. So that book comes out this year, and it's with Little Brown Book for Young Readers, and it's illustrated beautifully by Veronica Miller Jameson. It's just fabulously gorgeous. Oh my gosh, I have 3 books coming out next year, including one I'm really excited about, which is, we were talking about travel. This is with Atlas Obscura. Have you heard of the Atlas Obscura company? They are a company that kind of does travel for adults, but they actually did a kid's book a few years back, and they're doing the second one, which I am co-authoring with the awesome Dylan Thuris, who is part of the Atlas Obscura. And I'm hopefully going to get this name right. It's Atlas Obscura's Explorer's Guide to Inventing the World.
Wow.
You would love this book, George. It's all about inventions and the history of inventions and how they all interconnect. And that comes out next August. It is fabulous. It is a fabulous book. I cannot wait for that. And I actually do school visits. So if anybody's interested, you can find the information on my website. I do virtual ones. I do in-person ones. And let's see, I'm traveling all over the place, researching a couple of other books. Hint, there will be a book in 2 years about aliens and how to talk to them. It'll have astrobiology for kids in it, which is going to be, your mind is blowing, right? Your mind is blowing. Yes. We'll definitely come back and talk about that book when it comes out. I'm so excited about that book. It's going to be amazing. So yeah, I have my fingers in a lot of different pies, and, but it's all about the kids, again, of all ages. I have adults that read my books, my kids' books, right? I mean, I do. And they email me and they're like, oh my gosh, these are so awesome. My book, Brain Games, by National Geographic Kids, it's based on the TV show. They asked me to turn the TV show into a book. I have met so many neurologists, brain doctors, who give this to their patients, their adult patients, so they can learn about how their brain works and do these activities. I was like, really? That book is for like 8 to 12-year-olds. They're like, no, they love it. So yeah, I have a lot of things going. So check all those out, and then you can, check out my YouTube channel when I get that up and going, and maybe I'll get to do the question of the week thing. We'll see.
You have so much. You're so interesting to talk about, and it's inspirational and inspiring, and it's really fun. I'm really glad you are taking the time to travel and talk to people. For my friends in Mid-Pac, I'm looking at you guys too. Maybe you should be flying around to Hawaii, Spring Hill. Hey, she's right here. She's close,
Oh, I haven't been, so our trips to Hawaii, we've been there 3 times, and I've presented at the Pearl Harbor Aviation Museum a couple of times, which is amazing. So so I go out to Hawaii, like my husband and I go out there every year or two. So if I'm out there, let me know, and I'd be happy to pop in and do a school visit. Not going to make you pay for the whole travel, right? But then I get to write off the trip.
Yes. Yeah, well, I know my daughter used to go to a really phenomenal school called Mid-Pac out there, and it's an art school, and they do so much with STEM, and there's an amazing facility out there. So if any of my old friends or teachers or my daughter's family or friends are listening over there, check her out. She's got some really cool stuff. She would be a great addition to a speaker. So it's fascinating. Yeah, I'm stoked for you. I hope that you get to travel more and inspire more people. And
I would love that.
Yeah, me too. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope everybody within the sound of my voice is as excited as I am about today. I got to learn a lot, and we just scratched the surface. I hope you please go down to the show notes and check out one of the over 50 books that Jennifer has written. Listen to some of her lectures. Definitely check out her podcast. If you're an educator, reach out to her. She's really kind to talk to, and got a lot of cool ideas, and she's always willing to talk to people. So that's all we got for today, ladies and gentlemen. Jennifer, hang on briefly afterwards, but to everybody else, I hope everyone has a beautiful day and you never quit being curious. That's all we got. Aloha.
Without Gigamon, there are cyber threats his security tools simply cannot see, which means he could end up with his hair on fire. Deep observability from Gigamon makes it possible to expose previously hidden threats, even in encrypted traffic. Gigamon, deep observability.
Being a super power saver is as easy as BAM! Sign up for Power Saver Rewards. Save energy during a Flex Alert. Boom! Stop the power outage. Credit on your energy bill. Did you make this set yourself, Greg? I'll take that as a yes.
Hello, everybody. This is Brian Greene. And this...
Faith Saley, everybody.
Oh, thank you very much. And this is Brian Greene's book, in large print, because time has ravaged my eyesight. And I first interviewed you, Brian, a few months after this book came out in May of 2020, which everyone can imagine was a very specific time. You were upstate, I think.
Yeah.
I was in an apartment on the Upper West Side. It was on Zoom. The notion of time during those early days, when people said lockdown, it was a very specific experience to talk about time then. Now, to return to this, it's the same book. It was interesting to see what I dog-eared, to see what moved me, in fact, to tears again. I took a whole bunch of new notes. And I love that we're having this discussion at the New York Historical Society because, I mean, not only is this book about the entire history of the universe and about when history will cease to exist, but also because history is arguably both a science and an art. And you characteristically make room, in this book especially, for mathematics and music, for Schrödinger and Shakespeare. And I mean, it's just a joy to turn to the index of this book because you'll find there's Higgs particle, there's Mick Jagger, there's Big Bang, Big Bounce, Big Crunch, Big Rip. There's Over the Rainbow, Poe, Sylvia Plath, and you spend a moment on cheesecake, which I think, and you
vegan cheesecake.
Vegan cheesecake, and you make it germane. So my goal is to get to the cheesecake tonight. So history is about stories. And in this book, your story kind of begins with what you call the romance of mathematics. What do you mean by that? Or what did you mean by that?
Well, it's interesting. I grew up, 4 blocks from here, 81st Street. And at an early age, my dad, who was a composer, singer, musician, he didn't go to college. He had what he called an SPHD, Seward Park High School dropout.
So good.
But he loved ideas, and so he taught me the basics of arithmetic at a very young age, and then would set me these problems, like multiply this 30-digit number by this 30-digit number, and I would spend the weekends 4 blocks from here with large pieces of construction paper just multiplying these numbers out, and it just felt to me so compelling to do something that nobody had done before. Now, in those cases, it's because it wasn't interesting. Yeah.
You weren't trying to just get your dad's approbation. You loved it.
Yeah, totally. No, I just got pulled into this world of numbers, and it was kind of a romance of this mathematical language, which I feel strongly is one that we invent, that we don't discover, but this wondrous thing that we compose that allows us to go off into strange places of prime numbers and the Riemann zeta function. We all make these ideas up, but this world that we create is so rich and compelling.
Raise your hand if you're waiting for him to say Riemann zeta function. But in the book, you say that part of the romance, and this is relevant to this notion of thinking about our time, is and how finite it is that mathematics is a journey toward insights so fundamental they will never change.
Yeah.
Mathematics is permanent?
The truths are, and to me that is a remarkable quality. It was really first emphasized to me, again, when I was quite young. I went to IS 44, which is like 3 blocks from here, and I exhausted the math curriculum relatively quickly. So one of the teachers there gave me a letter. I didn't know what it said at the time. He said, take this, go up to Columbia and find somebody to teach you. So together with my older sister, I was like a little tiny, just like this. So we'd like walk in, we started knocking on doors, randomly handing this letter, and most would read it and hand it back. But in the math department, knocked on one door and gave it to a fellow, and he read it and he said, sure, I'll teach you. For free. We didn't have any money or anything. And so I would go 3 times a week, and he would take me on these mathematical journeys. And he was the one who really, when I started to get interested in physics, and I was asking him, like, why do you do math? Why is it your thing? And he said, I do math because once you prove a theorem, it stands forever. And it finally hit me. Everything else is impermanent. But these deep truths that come from this language of mathematics, they do stand beyond the test of time. And so there is something deeply compelling to latch on to those qualities.